Hello and welcome back to another installation of Film Music House Summer Edition. We are so excited today to bring to you another awesome panel demonstration workshop with the incredible Lili Haydn, moderated by the phenomenal composer, songwriter, Starr Parodi. Welcome, Starr.
I would love to introduce my friend, Lili Haydn. She's a Grammy winner. She's a composer. She's a solo recording artist. She's won a Grammy with her band Opium Moon, which is a NPR favorite. She has played as a soloist with everyone from Robert Plant to Sting to Herbie Hancock, opened for, to the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Parliament Funkadelic, close to my heart. And she's scored over 18 films. She's currently scoring the Netflix film or television series, Ginny Georgia. She's co-scoring that with Ben Bromfield. And she just scored also Strip Down, Rise Up. And her work on these films is just extraordinary. She has a very unique voice and palette of sounds. And so I thought it'd be really wonderful to talk with her about her approach, her process on these scores, and also how she really approaches music in general and gets her really unique sound and finds the voice for each project she works on. So Lili.
Hey,
Hi,
thank you so much for that sweet introduction, and hello, and I'm such a fan of yours, of course, and of you and your exquisite music, really.
Thank you. It's definitely mutual. Definitely huge.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because I've listened to both these scores for Ginny and Georgia and Rise Up, and I just think that you have such a unique way of using your voice and using the violin, which are such personal instruments to you, you know, and I love how you've weaved them into the scores, and also how stylistically each score within the context of the project is so different. There's so many different styles that are touched upon in Ginny and Georgia, and yet you manage to bring them all together with this kind of wonderful emotional cohesion, you know?
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your use of voice and violin and just how you found the sound for Ginny and Georgia.
Well, you know, my first language was the violin, so I kind of think through that lens in a way, although as a composer, I've had to be mindful not to overuse it. And actually, I've really been pretty sparse and conservative about using the violin and the voice, because it kind of draws attention, but then it becomes a very powerful device. So I relate emotionally to characters, as we all do. But I started out as an actress growing up as a child actor. So I really learned from an early age to listen to dialogue as, you know, kind of my North Star, and to relate to it dramatically, and to really allow myself to be affected by whatever's happening in a scene. And that's how I approach it as a composer. So it's very natural for me to respond to a given scenario with music, you know. So like all of us, you know, we hear music, it comes through, it's kind of a magical thing, and also a very technical thing, and we obviously put our 10 billion hours in to you know, become the best we can. But I found that you know, it's best for me, and I always enjoy other people's scores when it really comes from their voice. You know, there's so many amazing composers, but you can kind of tell, like, this is Starr Parodi, this is Nicholas Britell, this is Hans Zimmer. You know, you can tell, like, there's just and so I go with the thing that makes me, you know, that's my most unique voice, and it's melodic, but it also has to do with how it comes through these instruments. So I for those most intense and delicate moments, usually the violin and the voice is the sound that is the most penetrating.
You know, as I was listening to Ginny and Georgia, I was noticing how many different styles you touched upon, you know, and I thought that you know, in some respects, if you know, if a director is asking you to do a lot of different styles, it can kind of break up something, you know, break up a project. And I felt like the way that you did it and the way that you approached it really brought everything together. Everything seemed to really fit together. Can you talk a little bit about your palette of instruments, you know, your palette of sound, and how you approached, you know, doing all the styles and making them feel like they're coming together?
Yeah, thanks. I actually feel like both of these projects, Ginny and Georgia and Strip Down, Rise Up, the there was such a diverse palette of, you know, there was such a diverse temp, and it really did feel like it was all over the place. So sometimes you know, we walk into a project and, you know, the filmmaker on Strip Down, Rise Up, she's a veteran and Oscar nominated Michelle O'Heon. She's an amazing filmmaker, but, you know, so, and like really, you know, kind of very, very self-assured, let's say. So when I talked to her about trying to make a cohesive score, it was like, well, of course, of course. But then, you know, but she wanted it to be Fight Club for women. She wanted it to be feminine, but also very muscular. So I feel like the thing that I'm most proud of on these projects is having found a sound that did create a cohesive, you know, a cohesive, identifiable sound. And especially on Ginny and Georgia, where it's not just comedy, it's not just drama, it's not just kind of kitsch, it's not, there's a little bit of mystery, there's all these different influences, and it was a very difficult thread to weave, to find this sound. So what I do is I start with just letting my imagination run wild. And if I feel like doing trap music or drum and bass or strictly orchestral or, you know, kind of folky or whatever, I just let myself do that. And then I find a few threads in common that I can weave it all together so that it becomes like a tapestry as opposed to, you know, a bunch of different quilts. If you know what I mean. I don't sew, by the way, so I don't know what I'm talking about at all. But I do braid my hair a lot, so I have that. So, yeah, so it's, and oftentimes, you know, the violin and the voice are so human, and especially for these kind of, both of these projects were are really from the female perspective, the feminine gaze, as they say. So both my voice and my violin kind of have a little bit of that, you know, kind of connote that. So it's an easy way to, you know, I have to be very careful because when I play violin, it draws a lot of attention to itself. But when you just need that one moment where there's that look, where you need all the emotional baggage of why this person is self-harming or, you know, smiling when it's inappropriate, you know, I can go and just swelling into the note. Just one note can be, you know, that powerful thing. And if I do that in a drum and bass piece and then I put it in an orchestral piece, then we know it's the same voice in a way. It kind of, as long as I have an anchor point, I feel like I can travel around the world. And so that, I guess, is really my solo voice, and which I use sparingly.
I mean, you know, it's so powerful that, you know, and it's such a great thread, you know what I mean? It's just, it's so wonderful. You know, you and I were talking before this, you know, we were kind of nerding out on gear. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you like to record the violin and your voice, you know, maybe take us a little bit around your studio.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, talk about your mic, and we could talk about plugins.
I just wanted to add one more little thing about unifying the thread. Obviously, you know, a diverse score. Obviously, melody is, you know, a theme is queen, you know. So, and one of the things that I fell in love with when I was studying classical music was, you know, especially chamber music. The piano trio, piano, violin, and cello is my favorite kind of incarnation of this. My favorite thing is when a composer will bring in a theme in a major key in the first movement, and then by the last movement, it's played but in a minor key or in a different kind of modality, and to just feel that to me is like its own film. It's like it's the arc of a character, to see how a melody will transform itself. So that is my favorite thing to do, and that also obviously unifies the score. So in Ginny and Georgia, I've got this theme. We've got this theme. It's super quirky, and it kind of it's like a and it kind of it sort of bounces around with a little kind of like choraline vocals, la, 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 but it also kind of portends this ominous thing, with the half step. And then by the end of the series, when things have gone to hell, I've got this sort of this kind of electronic score. It sort of transforms into kind of a little bit colder, but it also sadder and more ominous. And I do. And then I play and sing it, where I go. I don't know if you can hear that over the Zoom network. But anyway, that's my favorite thing to do, is to play with a theme and have that be the sort of the metaphor for the character's spiritual and narrative evolution. Anyway, back to your question about plugins and stuff. I'd love to show you my stuff. So put my violin away and I'm gonna take this out of here, take you over to my little session here. I've got so on my violin, which is sort of a fun, so I love, basically I'm starting with this Brent Averill 1272 mic preamp. I don't know if you can see that. And then I go through this Bach 251, which is modeled after the Telefunken 451, which I absolutely adore. And usually people use different mics on violin and voice, which I probably could, and I'm saving up for a great ribbon mic, but I really love the sound of this. It works on everything. And then I run, okay, and then there is an EQ. Okay, so the violin can get very shrill, right? You know that because, you've have a daughter playing violin. I told her, who's so beautiful and such a beautiful player. And I just so love that she's playing for you on your new show. Congratulations.
Oh man, well, she absolutely thinks you're an inspiration to her. So,
Oh, well, we all have to get together. You guys come over to my studio and I'll show her some of these things too. Anyway, the violin, I started playing violin at 7 years old, but my mom used to tell people that I started playing violin in the womb, and it was very irritating. She was a comedian, my mom, Lotus Weinstock, the first woman to perform at the Comedy Store, and a groundbreaker.
You have the most amazing history. It is insane. I mean, you could talk like an hour about your history, because it's just, I mean, we'll get back to plugins, but I just have to say, your mom, good God.
My mom was an extraordinary being, and a feminist. And when I grew up, I didn't understand what she was going on about, because she had given me the sense that there was nothing off limits. And I didn't realize that really she had been, it was her generation, among others, that really was, allowed me to do whatever I want to do. Anyway, so I started playing violin young, and I've been playing professionally most of my life, but there was I'd always have to roll off the top end and try to boost the low end to try to not have that shrill sound, because you can't really, sometimes if you turn up the violin, it can be a little like a dagger in the eardrum. So I was mixing the Opium Moon album, And I just finally was like, enough already. I've got to find this frequency that's the dagger frequency. And I, after a lot of trial and error, I discovered that if I roll off a narrow notch, so this is the Fab Filter Pro Q3. Can you see that?
Yes, yeah.
And see my setting. So if you notice here, I'm boosting around 195, and I'm doing kind of a narrow notch at around 3486. And of course, I change that around when I, depending on what key I'm in and what I'm playing, but that's my starting point. And it's like, then I don't have to roll off the rest of I can keep the brilliance in the high end without the daggers. So that is one of my favorite things. And then after the Pro Q, I love Universal Audio Digital. It was a game changer for me. I was on Waves before, and a whole host of other things. And when I changed to UAD, it was like, oh, now my stuff sounds pro. I like it. It was a big investment, but for me, could not have been more worth it. So if there's anybody watching this who's interested, don't think twice, just do it. Anyway, so there's a great plugin from UAD called Fatso. So now that everybody's into big butts, which I've always had, here is Fatso, and there's a preset called Warmifier, which can you see that? So yeah, and you can
move it a little to your left. There you go. Good.
You can change the warmth. So I usually I'm adding warmth to it, and then I love to, like, for instance, I love to have different effects. And there's a piece of music in Strip Down Rise Up that I love that actually is my new single, and I have a lovely little remix. It's called Is This Love, Is This Life? And where I use a bunch of crystallizer on, the Sound Toys crystallizer on the violin, and multi-track it. And I'll just play you a little second of that if you'd like. Let me turn it on. And that's mostly, thank you. And that's mostly violin, like almost the entire track is violin and voice. And I really hadn't done that kind of spacious thing. I kind of, I always had other instruments and stuff, but it's really, I love just making a world with the violin, and those are my tools, one of my tools. And actually, I'll show you one other little thing that I love. I also use, in addition to plugins, I love using guitar effects. So I plug my violin into a Fender Blues amp, and I have these great vintage pedals. There's a Space Station and my TC Electronic, which is one of my favorite delays for violin. It's very warm. And then I have this ancient Digitech whammy pedal, which
Oh.
anyway, so those are some of my favorite guitar pedals to plug into, and I also love using a wah-wah pedal for the violin.
Are those mainly for recording or live, or for your pedals? How do you use your pedals?
I'll just mic the amp usually, and it's sometimes I will and I'll try to go I'll mic an amp, or I'll have two amplifiers, so it's a stereo thing. Probably a lot of our community know Tina Guo and Martin Tillman. Well, Martin and I were in a band together years ago, and we basically turned each other on to, so we're kind of the violin and cello counterparts to each other. And Martin paved the way for Tina, and Tina and I've played together with Hans, and Tina's played on some of my scores, and of course her trajectory has been miraculous, and she's such a beautiful player. So but I love to just experiment with the sounds. I mean, I also have a beautiful 1922 Italian violin, which just has, when you lean into it, that beautiful, depth of that wooden sound. So I love to explore all the sounds.
How do you choose which violin to use on your recordings?
Well, the one I was just playing is the one that has the pickup in it, and I use a Yamaha pickup that's in the bridge. They don't make them anymore, but there are some. If any violinists are out there and curious, it's the best pickup I've ever used. I used to use an LR Bags, which is great also, but this is by far the warmest, and you can find them around if you just search. It's a Yamaha violin bridge pickup, and so for that violin is from 1765. It's an English violin, but it's not as nice a violin, so I use it for my electronic stuff, or I use it when I'm doubling. So one of the other things I love to do is, when I can't hire an orchestra, I use Spitfire orchestral patches or Cinesamples. I also love and then I just multi-track violin and cello, and or I love Spitfire brass and woodwinds. So then I'll just bring in a soloist to kind of make it a little bit more real sounding and a little bit more soulful. So for when I need a really beautiful classical tone, I go for the old violin, the old the nice Italian violin.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How do you, when you're multi-tracking, how do you keep the violin from phasing? Do you stand in multiple areas, or do you, if you're do you ever double the same line, or are you just
I don't find, I haven't noticed that there's phasing especially if I'm using different violins. So I mean, when we're, I also sing and I'll double my voice. The sound that I use for Ginny and Georgia's vocals is generally I'll just sing through my Bach mic and my Neve preamp, and then I like to put a telephone EQ on, and I like to multi-track that. So I'll get a couple of and I like a filtered delay plugin on it as well, so that gets to stand out, but it can also still be really small and kind of below the dialogue, but it can, but it pokes out when it needs to. So how do I say the question again?
Oh yeah, you totally answered it. It was just about phasing and recording multi-tracks of the same thing. I wondered if you had any tricks or techniques or anything for that.
There's a trim plugin in Pro Tools where you can reverse the phase, and generally speaking, I'm mixing as I go, and if something's out of sorts, I'll figure that out. But I have not noticed that doubling and tripling is really does anything to cause phasing for me. Usually, where my phasing occurs and where it ends up affecting my mix is in the bass and drums. So that's where I am a little bit more meticulous, and I'll often call a mixer. And there's a great mixer named Jeff Gartenbaum who's been working with me, who did Strip Down, Rise Up and Ginny and Georgia.
Yeah, that sounds great. Bass is hard. Bass is just freaking hard sometimes, to get right.
Well, I'm married to a bass player, a phenomenal bass player. So, and one of the greatest influences on me was this bass player who was in my band back in the day when I first started. His name was Jeffrey Connor, and he's still out there playing, kind of from the Living Color school, the Parliament Funkadelic school, and also Lonnie Marshall who was the person who took me to hear P-Funk for the first time. So I got those bass. I'm kind of a closet bass player in my heart. So I tend to make bass very loud. And I have these Dynaudio acoustics speakers that have a lot of bass resonance in them. So I don't use a sub because then I get a little bit confused. But I'm starting to trust my ears as a mixer. And I'd actually, if there's anybody watching who is, who isn't trusting themselves, this is what I've learned over the years, is just your voice. One thing, okay, I'm just going to say this. One of the things that I love about the Alliance for Women Film Composers is the empowering nature that everybody has for each other, that knowing that we all succeed more, that we individually succeed more when all of us succeed. And one of the things that I remember, I think it was Lolita who said something like, men don't question, are they ready for the gig? Or, do they have a right to be there? They just do. And so that kind of gave me more permission to say, all right, you know what, I'm hearing this in a certain way, I'm going to just mix it, and it may be wrong, but maybe that, I've heard people like Trent Reznor talk, and they a lot of their techniques came from doing things that they heard. If it sounds good, it works. That's not an excuse not to learn, but I really am starting to feel like I can trust my instincts now, and it's really fun to feel that way. And I hope that if our conversation means anything to anybody who's watching, that we all help each other trust ourselves.
Amazing. Yes, that is so true. Sometimes as women, we just try to be perfect, and there is really no perfect, and what you're saying about just everything is subjective, and what you hear is just really, really the truth.
I just want to say one last thing before I know we're wrapping up. The Ginny and Georgia score, part of the reason that, that I got in the door, by the way, was from because Ben Bromfield invited me to pitch with him, and Ben was friends with the show creator and already had the in, and I want to thank him for that. And I feel so grateful that he and I have such a complimentary, wonderful working relationship. And I also want to thank all the men who are now helping to open the doors for women to be in the room where we've always belonged, but haven't always had the chance to be.
Oh, well, Lili, I meant to mention this at the very beginning, but it's really, really cool that Ginny and Georgia and Strip Down, Rise Up are both going to be on the ballot, on the Emmy ballot, primetime Emmy ballot this coming season, and very deservedly so. So I think they're on. Please tell the categories again, because one is for best dramatic score for primetime, right?
That's Ginny and Georgia, and is best dramatic score or best documentary score for primetime documentary.
Huge congratulations.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to you on your new shows. Can't wait to watch them and hear your music for them, and just so grateful to be part of this amazing community, truly. Thank you. And thank you, Chandler, so much for making this, this available to us, and for all your support from the beginning.
Yeah, Chandler, thank you so much. You and Thomas, White Bear, our heroes, really amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.